Yeah, I do.
All right, here we go. All right, we're live right now. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug, as always, and we are going to be doing our Sabbath day study right now. I hope everyone's having a great Shabbat. All right. I think for a change, I am going to be actually reading from my Bretons I have here. I recently got this Tom Horn's edition of the Brenton Septuagint, so I think I'll be using this today. So I'll be using that. Let's just see here. So we're going to go to the book of Yahusha. And what I do like about his edition that I recommend people check out, not on the Shabbat, but during the week, is if you're looking for a Septuagint and your eyes are not too good, this is a perfect version to get because it's pretty much in large print. So it's very easy to read. It's in bold font as well. Let's see here. Let me just see here. This is Leviticus. Now we need to go. Kings. Judges. There we go. Book of Yahusha, chapter 9. All right. Now, for the viewers and listeners, what I'll do as well is on the screen share here, I will need to back out of this and get my sword for Android. Okay, so just so people can follow along on the screen. Okay. All right. So, all right. Let's see here. Chapter 9. Here we go. Move this taskbar thing down. Okay, so it says here, when the kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan, who were in the mountain country and in the plain and in the coast of the great sea, and those who were near the Antibilonists and the Hittites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, Amorites, and Girgashites, the Jebusites, heard, they came all together at the same time to make war against Yahusha and Yashrael.
Yeah, sure. Okay. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Yahusha had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins cracked and mended. The men put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Yahusha in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Yashrael, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The men of Yashrael said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us. How then can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Yahusha. But Yahusha asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of Yahuwah, your Elohim, for we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey, go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us.' This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is. and these wineskins that we filled were new. But see how cracked they are, and our clothes, our sandals are worn out by the very long journey. The men of Yashrael sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of Yahuwah. Then Yahusha made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Yashraelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So the children of Israel set out, and on the 3rd day came to their cities, Gibeon, Kephirah, Beerot, and Kiriath Yearim. But the children of Israel did not attack them, because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yashrael. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by Yahuwah, the Elohim of Yashrael, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live, so that wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community." So the leader's promise to them was kept. Then Yahusha summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you deceive us by saying, 'We live a long way from you,' while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never cease to serve as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my Elohim." They answered Yahusha, "Your servants were clearly told how Yahuwah, your Elohim, had commanded his servant Moshe to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Yahusha saved them from the children of Israel, and they did not kill them that day. He made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of Yahuwah at the place that Yahuwah would choose. And that is what they are to this day.
Thanks, Mom.
Sure.
So, yeah, the big lesson there is don't be so trusting to everyone, even when it seems like someone's in need of help. Be careful, because by them making a covenant with these people, they've actually broken Torah by making a covenant with these people. So, and we can go back to the book of Deuteronomy to show you guys that, but these are 7 specific nations that they were not supposed to make any treaties with. And just to explain, a covenant is a treaty. It's one and the same thing. Historically, back in those times, covenants usually between nations would involve not making war with one another, becoming friends. Sometimes one nation serving another in tribute. It's the same thing as a covenant. Treaty is the same thing. So a lot of the times, that's what the actual covenant is a peace treaty. A lot of the times in ancient times. And it's kind of funny, because that's essentially what the covenant the beast is going to make is. So this kind of is pertinent to understand what actually a covenant in the Eastern culture would actually be. It would entail things. It would you being accepting of other cultures, mighty ones as well. Like, for example, the whole coexist thing, that's making a covenant in a weird way. In a spiritual aspect, you're making a covenant with sorry guys, allergies are out today like crazy. So basically, like the whole coexist thing, like we can all get along. I'll be accepting of your religion, you're accepting of my religion. In ancient times, that's considered like a peace treaty. And that would actually be breaking with what Yahuwah says in a spiritual sense. Not to be, Yahuwah doesn't want us to coexist with other belief systems, so on and so forth. So that's what I took away from this chapter. So let me see here. Let's see if anyone has anything else they wanted to bring up. I mean, also this shows how serious a covenant is, and how really, if you make a covenant with someone, you're bound by oath, and you have to be a person of your word. Now today, that's kind of gone through the tubes, because most people today, they're not a man or woman of their word. Most societies are not. So this is kind of a lost culture of, you agree on a covenant, you need to keep it. And same thing with vows and promises. So this is why scripture says, if you don't want to make a vow to Yahuwah, you don't have to. Because once you make a vow, you're bound by it. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Maybe off record, I want to come back to that on vows. But on if I remember, it says, a man shall not, or there shall not fail out of you. Let me go. I should just go to it. Now therefore you are cursed, and there shall none of you be freed from. Okay, let me read it in the Septuagint, because it completely. Oh wow, that completely rewords it. Masoretic. And now you are cursed. There shall not fail of you a slave or a woodcutter or a water carrier to me and my Alua. So I wonder if by there shall not fail of you means that there will continuously be from you woodcutters and water carriers. And if so, then that would mean that these people are still amongst natural Yashral today, that they still exist.
Yeah, it's possible. They definitely, I'll say this, there definitely is documented in scripture that they existed around the time of Solomon, among them. It's even mentioned that he put them as laborers, because it says, they were not, it says, among those who the children of Yashrael were not able to destroy, Solomon, basically made them tribute labor to him. And so, yeah, I would say we might not be able to prove it in 2022 that they're still around, but they definitely were still documented to being servants of Israel, even towards the end of the Tanakh time period. So the problem is, we don't know who the Canaanites are today and where exactly they are, because certain Canaanites even got interbred with Israel. So it gets very convoluted when you talk about where the Canaanites are today, how many of them are really left. It gets kind of tricky with that genetically, because Solomon, I think, had a Canaanite wife or a Hittite wife. It gets really confusing, where, some Judeans might even today be part Canaanite in a weird way. They might be, half and half on some of the Yahudim. So it's kind of hard to tell. I'm pretty sure there's some still around, but it's just hard to prove at this point. But they were definitely around at 900 BC at the minimum. They were still around that time period. And I think debating on whether the word Canaanite is correct in the New Testament, it seems like one of Yahusha's followers might have been a Canaanite. I forget exactly if that's true or not, because I remember looking into that word where it calls one of the disciples a Canaanite. I would have to look and see if that's correct or not. But we know that towards the middle and end of the first covenant time period, they were still around. We know that for a fact. And they were still being servants, like slaves, to Israel. So I would assume that covenant still, since it's bound by oath, it's still in effect today. What's interesting though is Yahuwah seems to nullify it by the time it's the millennium, because he says, "No longer will a Canaanite be in my house." So it seems like he's kind of like, all right, that's it. Like, and I think that's in Isaiah. I forget if it's Isaiah 14. Obviously, we're not at there yet, but future context, it does seem like he cuts it off, that oath, and like, no longer will there be a Canaanite in my house and all that. I think it's in Isaiah 14:21 or something like that. So there seems to be like I don't know. It seems like Yahuwah's making a cutoff point how long that would last. So I don't know exactly if that's the same context as this, but it seems like for whatever reason he's cutting them off.
To that point where it says no longer will there be a Canaanite in my house. And then, you mentioned that Yashral, even physical Yashral today can have Canaanite lineage in them because of the mixing. There's a brother that I was listening to the other day, and he's one of the very few that I would call natural that actually understands that, that there is no pure blood anymore. That the mixing has just been, so much that no one's pure blood of really anything. Everything has just been mixed. And he mentioned the need for being reborn, being born of the Ruach when Yahusha comes. And he pointed out that because of the mixing, because, even those that would say that they were natural Yashral have been, even their blood has been mixed and defiled. And just each one of us have just been like, our DNA corrupted, our bloodlines corrupted to some extent, and thus the one of the need. I mean, I know there's other reasons why, but one of the reasons for needing to be born again, because you get where I'm going with that. If let's say if there's a physical a natural born Yashral, but that natural born Yashral has, or Yahudi has, Canaanite lineage in them, something that cannot enter into the kingdom, then they have to be, their DNA has to be renewed. They have to be reborn.
Yeah, I would say to a certain extent, I agree, but I kind of disagree at that as a whole, because the bigger issue, regardless of ethnicity, is when sin entered the world, that changed DNA by default. So you could be a pure Israelite and still need the resurrection. That's the point I'm trying to bring, is that, and I think we sometimes get a little too concerned about ethnicity and stuff like that. We need to understand that regardless, you could be 100% Shemite and you still need a resurrection. So that's my point.
I'm not talking about ethnicity. I'm talking about Torah that says that these things, these people wouldn't enter into the assemblies.
Yeah, no, I understand, bro, but that doesn't negate that before that, there was still need of a resurrection from the beginning. There, regardless of the Canaanite thing, you needed a resurrection regardless.
That's why I said that this is only one of the reasons. There's.
Oh no, I know what you're saying. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just saying that sometimes we focus on the physical too much and don't understand the bigger issue is we have a body of sin that we've been born into, and without a resurrection as a whole, no one of any physical body is going to get into the kingdom. And that was Yahusha's bigger point in Brit Hadashah. You need to be physically born again. If you can't enter the kingdom having sin in you. That's the bigger problem. Our bodies are not Yahuwah's. I think the bigger problem is, I know you understand this, and a lot of our brothers and sisters in this fellowship understand this, but I don't think Yahshua understands this as a whole. We are not his image right now. His image has been corrupted. Because the image that he created us in has been corrupted, we need to be reborn on a bigger scale. That's for everyone. It needs to be reborn. So I can agree with that brother said to an extent, but I think it's a lot broader than that. Was the point I was trying to bring out. Is it's a lot broader than that. And that could be one of the reasons, but even let's just say Canaanite thing never happened, right? You still need the resurrection. That did not cause the need for the resurrection. The resurrection was going to be needed the moment sin entered the genome of humanity. The moment that Adam and Kua lost their bodies of esteem, that moment caused the need for a resurrection, regardless. Like, I'm just putting out hypotheticals here. Let's just say that the Canaanite thing never happened. Judah never had Canaanite blood. You would still need a resurrection. So that's kind of the bigger point I'm bringing out is I would agree with that to an extent, but I know you're not saying that. But that alone is not the only, and like I said, you're not saying that either. But I just want the audience, so that I'm clear here, I'm not saying that genetic mixing, and Brother Yahusha is not saying that either in context. Genetic mixing is not the only reason for the resurrection. They're as a whole, original sin caused the need for a resurrection. The moment the fall of man happened, at that moment, you need a resurrection. And they're Adam and Kua, if they don't get a resurrection, there's no way that they're going into the kingdom. You go through every patriarch. That, by the way, at that point, they were fully Shemite. So this is the reason I'm bringing this out. They're fully Shemite in the beginning of time. They still need a resurrection. So that, and Brother Yahusha, again, just want to clarify for him, just so people don't misunderstand him. He's not saying that's the only reason, but it is a reason because Scripture does say that no longer will Canaanite enter Yahuwah's house or enter the kingdom. But I think we talked about this before on the record, and Brother Yahusha brought this up. When you get grafted in, you're no longer spiritually that identity. So I'll give you an example, right? A lot of people misunderstand Obadiah chapter 1 and think that no one that has Edomite blood in them could enter the kingdom. Well, problem with that is Job's a Edomite. He's going to be in the kingdom. So what we have to realize is when we get grafted in, like, our identity changes as far as spiritually. Like Yahuwah would not look at us Romans or Edomites as Edomites or Romans as far as citizenship goes. That's what I'm saying. As far as citizenship goes and what seed line we're part of spiritually, he does not look at us as an Edomite. So I think it's important to understand that when we look at prophecy, when it says no longer will Canaanite, enter my house, and he talks about I'm going to utterly destroy the Edomites. He's talking about obviously unconverted Edomites, unconverted Canaanites that are truly physically and spiritually Canaanites. So I think it's important to understand that too. Like some of these tribes, they weren't converted that were servants to Israel. Some of them were just slaves. They were serving Israel. That's all they were. They were tribuni slaves. That's why Torah talks about you don't enslave your brother or sister, but you can enslave a heathen. You can enslave a Gentile. But so we need to understand that, though, that when it talks about a Canaanite shall enter into my house, no longer shall a Canaanite enter my house, it's not necessarily talking about ethnicity, as in, anyone with Canaanite bloodline can't enter, or that Yahuwah is going to destroy everyone with Edomite blood, because if someone that is mixed and has Canaanite blood in them repents and believes in Yahusha, ultimately Yahusha's blood is getting them into the kingdom. And so that's why I truly believe ethnicity. And I know Brother Yahusha is not coming against this either. This is why we don't believe ethnicity gets you out of the kingdom. Because ultimately it matters what spiritual seed line you're a part of, if that makes any sense. If you're unconverted, regardless of your ethnicity, you're not getting it, regardless. So, and that goes in with Gentiles too. If you're of a Gentile lineage and you don't repent, then that's what's going to happen. So I think it's important to understand too that when we get grafted in, our identity changes. We're, in Yahuwah's eyes, we're not, part of those nations anymore. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. I wasn't trying to be argumentative or anything. I was just trying to make a point that I would agree that since Yahuwah says there's no longer a Canaanite, that's one of the reasons for the resurrection. But there's that's a whole nother topic that I would have to dive into, where the necessity for the resurrection pretty much started in Genesis 3, you can say. It goes all the way back to Bereshit chapter 3. The moment Kua took the bite of the fruit, that was it. Mm-hmm. But that's all. Yeah. No, it's all good, bro. I don't want people. I just don't want people out there thinking we're like one of those that's part of those other camps. So I want to make it very clear that we're not promoting that. So there. And I would say, though, the Canaanite thing is very possibility that it's another reason for the resurrection. But from what I've studied, the resurrection need goes all the way back to Genesis 3, even before, Isaiah wrote his book. So this goes, because we have to understand on a larger scale what sin does to our genetics. And we have to understand that the bodies we have now were not our original bodies. I think that's where the confusion comes from in our church upbringing, is not understanding that this is not his image. What you see right here is fallen mankind. This is not his image. Yahuwah is light. Yahusha is light. They have bodies of light. Their sons, the messengers, Yahuwah's son, Yahusha's sons have bodies of light. They don't have bodies of fallen flesh. So that's number one we need to understand, is that the resurrection, even the need for it, goes all the way back to the fall of man, all the way back. So that's why I forget, there's scriptures where Paul talks about it. He talks about how, he basically talks about corruption cannot inherit incorruption. Mm-hmm. So on a bigger, larger scale, any type of human body you have, according to Paul, is corruption. Incorruption is what Yahuwah is, light. Mm-hmm. So on a bigger, larger scale, we need to physically put on incorruption, bodies of incorruption. That goes for every ethnicity out there. So that was my only point. I was trying to bring out that on a larger scale, every person needs it, regardless what. And we're just talking about hypotheticals here at this point, because if, let's just say, every ethnicity from the beginning of time was pure, you still need a resurrection. And that's kind of the point I was trying to bring about. So, but for us to fully understand, we have to understand why we need a resurrection. It's because of the fall. The fall made us susceptible to sin. It made us, before Messiah came, it made us actually enslaved to our sinful flesh that's dwelling in us. And Messiah gave us the power to overcome that sinful fallen body that constantly wants you to subject yourself to the law of sin and death. And that's what Paul talks about all the time. So, but I really recommend people really look into that and study that for themselves, really look into what the image of Yahuwah is, because it's not what we've been told. I know from our church upbringing, this is Yahuwah's image, the human body is his image. If you look in scripture, he's constantly described as light. He dwells in light. He, his sons are luminaries. Okay, so that's something you guys might want to check out for yourselves. Do your own study on. But anyway, so trying to think what else we got. So see here. So we got, they murmured at the princes. I'm just seeing if there's anything else. Mainly this chapter was really about that covenant that they made with. Now, was it all these giant tribes they made the covenant with, Mom? Or was it a specific one?
I thought it was just the Hittites. But
Just the Hittites, huh?
I could be mistaken.
Interesting.
I think they're Hivites.
Hivites. Okay, yeah. Okay. And I forget, but there's certain passages in the Torah where the Masoretic omits one of the tribes at a certain point. I forget when that happens, but it will start like only listing 6 of the tribes versus the 7 in the LXX. I think there's a couple of places in Deuteronomy where they start doing that, which I could understand. I guess in their opinion, they felt like since one of the tribes was killed at that point, to omit it, but you're still taken away from his word at that point. So I mean, their excuse would be, oh well, one of the tribes is already killed by the time it's Deuteronomy, and yada yada yada. But I remember, like, when testing it out, the Septuagint always has the 7 tribes mentioned, versus the Masoretic sometimes will leave one out. So let's see. I'll read chapter 10 here, since my mom took over for me. All right. So chapter 10. When Adoni-Bezek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Yahusha had taken Ai and had destroyed it, as he did to Jericho and its king, even so they did to Ai and its king, that the inhabitants of Gibeon had gone over to Yahusha and Yasharal. Then they were greatly terrified by them, for the king knew that Gibeon was a great city, as one of the chief cities, and all its men were mighty. So Adoni-Bezek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Elam, king of Hebron, and Phidon, king of Yeramuth, and to Jephthah, king of Lachish, and Dabin, king of Adullam, saying, come here to me and help me. Let us take Gibeon, for the Gibeonites have gone over to Yahusha and to the children of Yasharal. And the 5 kings of the Jebusites went up, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Yeramuth, and the king of Lachish, and the king of Adullam. They and all their people encamped around Gibeon and besieged it. My mom was asking me this. She had a good question earlier this week. She was asking me, why is it already called Jerusalem? So what we got to understand is a lot of these geographical locations, Israel didn't give them these names. So, for example, Salem was already a name of a place before Israelite ever inhabited Jerusalem, if that makes any sense. That was already a name that was given. Now, there are some times where they take over places and give them new names, but as far as Jerusalem, it was never renamed Jerusalem. It always was called Jerusalem.
What confused me was having a king of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And I was saying to myself,
yeah.
I thought we didn't have kings until,
no Israelite kings, but as far as these locations, you got to remember too, Mom, that Yahuwah's taking them, he's taking Israel on a conquest, right? So what's a conquest? Taking over other people's lands.
Right.
So Jerusalem wasn't originally Israel's land.
Right. That's what I didn't
understand. So Bethel was not originally, Jacob's land. Yahuwah gave it to him, but originally it was inhabited by other people.
Right.
So that's important to take note of. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
It's interesting. Normally the Complete Apostles Bible would line up with the Britons here. But in this case, it seems like the Britons is actually lining up with the Charles Thompson, whatever manuscript he's using. They use it says Adoni Bezek, whereas the Complete Apostles Bible and the ABP is a Adoni Zedek or Adoni Zadok, master of or Lord of righteousness, or Adonai of righteousness.
Yeah. Let me see here. I'm gonna look at the EBP real quick and see if they have anything in the Greek there to see which one's more accurate. Let me see here.
The ABP says Adoni Zadok, but the thing with the ABP is it never gives the Strongs for names, as far as I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I don't like. Yeah, it just gives you that asterisk. Yeah, I really don't like that. Oh. Yeah, hold on. Yeah, I don't like that. The only way to really figure this out is to like highlight the Greek text and then try to do a Google Translate. That's the only way you're going to really get accurate. I could probably do that and see to figure out. I wonder if it is supposed to be Bezek, because I wonder if this.
Just look at that the letter right before that E looking thing. I would imagine that would be the letter that you need to figure out whether it's a Z or a B.
Yeah, let me see. I'm gonna put it. Wait, I think it can translate from the highlight. Hold on, I'm doing this on my sword here. Let me see here. I'm gonna try to highlight it on my sword, the actual Greek word, then do Google Translate. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, it's definitely Zedek. Yeah. So unless I can find a Greek to the Bretons, I would have to side with the ABP on that one. It's probably supposed to be Zedek.
And if Jerusalem is the same place as Salem, then it's interesting that you have Malek Zadok in the time of Abraham, and then you have Adoni Zadok in the time of right now. Almost like that name Zadok was continued, like only at this point he's no longer. It's not a king of righteousness, even though that's his.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that this one has Adonai in his name, and he's against Israel. I kind of find that interesting because you track back the word Adonai, it goes back to Adonis and Baal. So it's kind of interesting that his name slightly is different from Yahusha's pre-incarnate name as the king of Salem. So it's kind of interesting. It's like a anti-Yahusha king here.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Interesting.
Yeah, because Adonai would be Adonis, Adonis, Baal. So that's why. And for FY people out there, that's why I don't like using Adonai, any form of Adonai. I won't use Adon, like any form of it. I don't like using that word because it goes back to another mighty one. Yeah. So, but anyway, yeah, I definitely think this guy's a little bit different from Yahusha. Just the fact that he's coming against Israel and he's joining up with these other kings kind of reminds me of Genesis 14 a little bit, where you have a couple of kings being ganged up together to go against Israel. And it's kind of funny. Genesis 14 is where Abraham has to go against these four kings. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it even talks about the kings of the Amorites. So let's see. I think I left off in verse 6. It says, "And the inhabitants of Gibeon sent to Yahusha in the camp of Gilgal, saying, Slack not your hands from your servants. Come quickly to us, help us, and rescue us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the hill country are gathered together against us." And Yahusha went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, everyone mighty in strength. And Yahuwah said to Yahusha, "Fear them not, for I have delivered them into your hands. There shall not one of them be left before you. And when Yahusha came suddenly upon them, he advanced all night out of Galgala, and Yahuwah struck them with terror before the children of Yashra, and Yahuwah destroyed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and they pursued them by the way of going up of the Oranim, and they smote them to Azekah and Makeda. Interesting. Now, Makeda, I think, is still around today. Or no, there's a place called Makeba, I think, in Africa. So that's interesting. I think there's an actual person in Africa that was called Makeba.
That lady, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
philosophy lady
Yeah.
who's the one that was on the Cosby Show that time.
I wonder if Makeda is still in that region. I would want to look up.
Miriam, I think.
Yeah, Makeba. Yeah, with a B instead of a D. Yeah.
Mhm.
When they fled from the face of the children of Yashrael at the descent of Oranim, then Yahuwah cast upon them hailstones from heaven to Azekah, and they were more that died by hailstones than those whom the children of Yashrael slew with the sword in the battle. Then Yahusha spoke to Yahuwah in the day in which Yahuwah delivered the Amorite into the power of Yashrael when he destroyed them in Gibeon. They were destroyed before the children of Yashrael, and Yahusha said, let the sun stand over against Gibeon, and the moon over against the valley of Elon. And the sun and the moon stood still until Elua executed vengeance on their enemies. And the sun stood still in the midst of heaven. We never pay attention to that. The moon stood still too. We always pay attention to the sun not moving, but the moon didn't move either. That's interesting. It did not proceed to set till the end of one whole day. And there was not such a day neither before or after, so that Elua should hearken to a man, because Yahuwah fought on the side of Yashrael. What's interesting to me is it's saying the sun did not set until the end of one whole day.
Mm-hmm.
So that shows right there a day can't be 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Because like normally the sun sets in what, 12 hours, right? Sunrise, sunsets, 12 hours.
Yeah.
So it's saying that the sun didn't set until the whole day was over, meaning 24 hours later. So that's an important verse to show people against this whole weird doctrine of the 12-hour day nonsense. So that proves that a day is not 12 hours. And these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in a cave that is in Makeda. And it was told Yahusha, saying, the 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave that is in Makeda. And Yahusha said, roll stones to the mouth of the cave, set men to watch over them, but do not stand, but pursue after your enemies and attack the rear of them. Do not allow them to enter into their cities, for Yahuwah our Lord has delivered them into our hands. And it came to pass when Yahusha and all Yashrael ceased destroying them utterly with a great slaughter, that they escaped and took refuge in the strong cities. And all the people returned safe to Yahusha to Makeda. Not one of the children of Yashrael murmured with his tongue. And Yahusha said, open the cave and bring out these 5 kings out of the cave. And they brought out the 5 kings out of the cave, the king of Jerusalem, and the king of Hebron, the king of Yeremooth, and the king of Lachish, and the king of Odalam. And when they brought them out to Yahusha, then Yahusha called together all Yashrael and the chiefs of the army that went with him, saying to them, come forward and set your feet on their necks. And they came and set their feet on their necks. And Yahusha said to them, do not fear them, neither be cowardly, be courageous and strong, for thus Yahuwah will do to all your enemies against whom you fight. And Yahusha slew them, hanged them on 5 trees, and they hung upon the trees until evening. And again, that's a reference to capital punishment. So that's what they would do to people that deserve capital punishment. They would hang them on a tree or impale them on a stake, and then at evening they would have to take them off the stake. Okay, so let's see here. So what's that? Verse 27, yeah. And it came to pass toward the setting of the sun, evening, okay, Yahusha commanded that they took them down from the trees and cast them into the cave into which they had fled for refuge. Rolled stones to the cave which remained till this day. And they took Makeda on that day and slew the inhabitants with the edge of the sword, and they utterly destroyed every living thing that was in it, and there was none left in it that was preserved and had escaped. And they did to the king of Makeda as they did to the king of Jericho. And Yahusha and all Yashrael with him departed out of Makeda to Lebna, besieged Lebna, and Yahuwah delivered it into the hands of Yashrael, and they took it and its king. And slew the inhabitants with the edge of the sword, everything breathing in it, and there was not left in it any that survived and escaped. They did to its king, and they did to the king of Jericho. And Yahusha and all Yashrael with him departed from Lebna to Lachish, and he encamped about and besieged it. And Yahuwah delivered Lachish into the hands of Yashrael, and they took it on the second day. They put the inhabitants to death with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed it, as they had done to Lebna. And Elam, the king of Gezer, went up to help Lachish, and Yahusha smote him and his people with the edge of the sword until there was not left him one that was preserved and escaped. Interesting. Okay, verse 34. And Yahusha and all Yashrael with him departed from Lachish to Odalam, and he besieged it and took it. And Yahuwah delivered it into the hand of Yashrael, and he took it on that day and slew the inhabitants with the edge of the sword, and slew everything breathing in it, as they did to Lachish. And Yahusha and all Yashrael with him departed to Hebron, and encamped about it, and he smote it with the edge of the sword, and all the living creatures that were in it. And there was no one preserved. They destroyed it and all the things in it, as they did to Odalam. Yahusha and all Yashrael returned to Dabir, and they encamped around it. And they took it and its kings and its villages, and he smote it with the edge of the sword, and they destroyed it. And everything breathing in it, they did not leave it any one that was preserved, as they did to Hebron and her king. So they did to Dabir and her king. And Yahusha smote all the land of the hill country, and the Negeb and the plain country, and Asdod, her kings. They did not leave of them one that was saved. They utterly destroyed everything that had breath of life, as Yahuwah Elu of Yashrael commanded, from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza, all Gassam as far as Gabion. And Yahusha smote once for all their kings in their land, because Yahuwah Elu of Yashrael fought on the side of Yashrael. So very interesting. I know a lot of people might be thinking, like, how does this pertain to us today? What is the application of this? I believe that Yahusha Bar Nun, son of Nun, he was a type of Yahusha. So I still think that this has application, because I believe in the millennium we might be seeing a lot of this. I think there's going to be a lot of cleansing. Yahusha is going to be doing a lot of cleansing. Well, not just, I mean, murdering, cleansing.
Oh, okay.
Cleansing the wicked, destroying the wicked.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's what Yahusha Bar Nun's doing here. He's killing the wicked.
Yeah.
So I think that's what Yahusha is going to be doing. A lot of us forget that part of Yahusha's personality as Messiah Bar David, or Daoud, is being a warrior king.
Right.
Warrior is part of being a warrior is killing. Okay, so I think a lot of people have a one-sided view of the millennium, and they don't realize part of the millennium. I believe before you're going to have all that 1,000 years of peace, he's going to be doing some cleansing. Yeah. Stoning will come back. There will be Yahuwah's government finally. The government
Yeah.
shall be upon his shoulders.
Yeah.
When you think about
Right.
it, right? Was it upon his shoulders in his first coming? No,
Not at all.
because he wasn't in charge in his first coming. He wasn't able to fulfill that. He was a lowly, meek, carpenter, kind of how Daoud started out. And when he comes back, he's going to be that warrior king, which Daoud was when Daoud became king. So it's kind of like, you have two parts of Yahusha's personality. And so I believe that Yahusha is going to be a warrior king when he comes back. And those that don't want to submit to, Yahuwah, there's definitely going to be some slaughtering. You can even see this. I think even post millennium, there's a verse Yahusha, he says to, I think in the book of Luke, he's saying to the disciples, he says, in that day, you will bring before those that would not worship me.
Right.
And, he commands them to be killed. So we love to think about Yahusha's mercy, his favor, his kindness and this and that, but we tend to push away the other part of his personality, which is he's a righteous Alua, and being a righteous Alua means that, that he has to judge according to someone's works, and he has to judge according to a person's heart in their works and their intentions. And so, anyway, so I think that's why this is what we're reading about actually is applicable even in the millennium. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
Never mind.
Okay. But yeah, I see a lot of foreshadowing to possibly what might be happening in the millennium when he comes back and all that. I think we got chapter 11 next. Brother Yahusha, would you like to read chapter 11 for us?
Sure. Okay. Now, when Yabes, king of Azar, heard this, he sent to Yabab, king of Maram, and to the king of Simun, and to the king of Azif, and to the kings who bordered on Great Sidon, to the hilly country, and to Arabah over against Kinarath, and to the plain, and to Phaneador, and to the Canaanites on the eastern shore of the sea, and to the Amorites on the seashore, and to the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Jebusites on the mountains, and to the Ivites, and to those at the foot of Armon, to the land of Masuma. And they and their kings, I'll have to come back here. And they and their kings with them came out like the sand of the sea for multitude, with horses and chariots in great abundance. And when all these kings had assembled and formed a junction and encamped at the water of Maran to fight against Yasharal, Yahuwah said to Yahusha, do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow about this time I will deliver them up vanquished before Yasharal. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. So Yahusha and all the warriors came upon them suddenly at the water of Maran and fell upon them in the hilly country. And Yahuwah delivered them into the hands of Yasharal, and they pursued them with slaughter to Great Sadun and to Masaran and to the plains of Masuk eastward, and hewed them down till there was none of them left alive. And Yahusha did to them as Yahuwah commanded him. Their horses he hamstrung, and their chariots he burned with fire. And at that time Yahusha turned back and took Asor and the king thereof. Now Asor was formerly the head of all these kingdoms. And they slew every living soul in it with the sword and utterly destroyed all, so that there was not one left in it alive. And they burned Asor with fire. Then Yahusha took all the cities of those kingdoms and the kings thereof, and smote them with the edge of the sword, and utterly destroyed them, as Moshe, the servant of Yahweh, had commanded. But Yashrael did not burn any of the cities which were built on lofty situations, except Asor. This alone Yashrael burned. And the Yashlim took all the spoils thereof for themselves, and exterminated the inhabitants with the edge of the sword until they destroyed them. They did not leave a breathing soul of them. As Yahweh commanded his servant Moshe, and as Moshe gave it in charge to Yahusha, so Yahusha did. He left nothing undone of all that Moshe commanded him. So Yahusha took all the hilly country, and all the land of Negab, and all the land of Gosam, and the plain, and that to the west, and the mountain of Yashraal, and the lowlands adjoining the mountain, from Mount Chelka, and that which stretches up to Sair, even to Baghdad, Balagad, and the plains of Lebanon at the foot of Mount Armon. He took and smote and slew all the kings thereof. Yahusha indeed waged war against those kings for several years, so that there was not a city which Yashraal did not take. They took them all by battle. For Yahuwah permitted them to assume courage to come to battle with Yashraal, that they might be utterly destroyed, that no mercy might be shown them, but that they might be utterly destroyed, as Yahuwah commanded Moshe. At that time also Yahusha went out and rooted out the Anakim from the hilly country, from Hebron, and from Dabir, and from Anabath, and from the whole race of Yashraal, and from all the mountain of Yehuda. Them with their cities Yahusha destroyed, so that by means of the children of Yashraal there is not one of the Anakim left, except some who are in Gaza, and in Gath, and in Asaldo. And when Yahusha had taken all the land as Yahuwah commanded Moshe, he gave it for an inheritance to Yashraal in parcels according to their tribe, and the land rested from war. Interesting that this guy, Yabis, king of Azor, he sends, it says he sent to the Amorites, he sent to the Canaanites, he sent to all these different people, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, and then it also says he sent to the Hivites, but the Hivites were the ones that made the covenant with Yashraal. They would have known that, so I wonder why he sent to the Hivites.
Not too sure. The only thing what kind of struck me was some of the geographical things that were mentioned here and towards the end. So it seems like we have some evidence of the Philistines being giants here, not just Goliath, but it seems like as a tribe they would have been giants, because it says they after it talks about the Anakim being destroyed, it said that they gave them, let's see, it says, verse 22, there was not any left of the Anakim by the children of Yashrael, only there was left of them, meaning Anakim, in Gaza and in Gath and in Asado. And now Gath, we obviously know, is the territory of the Philistines. So that would mean that the minimum, some of the Philistines like go straight back to the Anakim. And so we know that the Anakim came from the giants, according to Numbers 13. So we kind of have that genetics still left over in certain areas like Gaza and Gath. So that's what kind of struck out to me. That's kind of interesting that it mentions there. Yeah, but as far as the Hittite thing that you mentioned, I can't really figure a reason.
I wonder if even though Yashar would have been faithful to their covenant, obviously, but I wonder if there were other Hivites that they didn't necessarily feel the same way. And then when this king sent to them, they were like, maybe we could defeat them, and so you had some of them actually rebelling out of the covenant that was made with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. Yeah. That's very possible. I noticed too that early in the chapter it mentions Herman. Let me see if I can see where is that mentioned here. It talks about Sidon. Found it interesting that Sidon is mentioned here, like the territory of Tyre. Let's see here where it talks about Herman. There we go. Verse 3, the Canaanites on the coast eastward, and to the Amorites on the coast, and the Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites in the mountain, and the Hivites, and those dwelling under Mount Hermon in the land of Masema. So it's kind of interesting. Like, whenever I notice Mount Hermon, I try to take note of it, because that's where the quote unquote fathers of the giants descended to, according to the book of Enoch. They, in the days of Jared, they descended to Mount Hermon. So it's kind of interesting that these giants, or these tribes that would have had some giants in them, are dwelling there still. It seems to be a territory that they kept hold of even after the flood.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's just something I take note of, because I remember reading that way back when I first read Enoch. I was like, Mount Hermon, okay. And yeah, you'll see that a lot. Like Canaanites will be living in Mount Hermon. Hittites will be, a lot of the giant tribes would be still living there even after the flood. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of claims. I can't say this is factual, but there are some theories out there that supposedly where Yahusha took his disciples to, where he kind of, makes a declaration over Sheol, and he says, go ahead, Mom, go ahead. And he talks about, the gates of Sheol won't prevail against my assembly. The some people's views of that is that he was actually pointing to the statue of Pan, and that it was actually they were at Mount Hermon, and he was pointing to the, the stupid satyr Pan, and making that declaration. Because Pan and, the satyr god Pan in a way represented Satan, I guess, to the occult. It's like an allegory for Satan, because it's, goat man, goats are his children, and all that. So, but that's what some people believe. That's where geographically they was Mount Hermon, when he was talking to his disciples about the assembly, and it was almost like Yahusha was making war with the fallen angels there, saying, the gates of Sheol, the gates of Tartarus, won't prevail against my assembly. So if that's true, it'd be kind of interesting, because we see that a lot where Yahuwah, he makes fun of the false gods in his word a lot. You could say, even in a facetious way, he's actually challenging Zeus, because in the Tanakh, a lot of the times, Yahuwah will be called King of the Mighty Ones, or the Mighty One of Mighty Ones, which is, if you know anything about mythology, the Greeks call Zeus the King of the Gods. So when you start seeing stuff like that in scriptures, like, is Yahuwah kind of like, kind of challenging the false gods and saying, and kind of putting a little axe in them, like, yeah, I'm the real King of the Mighty Ones. I'm the real king. You want to claim to be the head of the divine council. I'm really the one that's the head. So, I just find stuff interesting like that. find stuff like that interesting. So, but I definitely think it's possible Yahusha could have been challenging Satan by saying that the gates of Sheol, Tartarus won't prevail against his assembly, and all of that. So yeah, but it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff about Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon seems to be one of the geographical places in Scripture that's not talked about a lot in the canon, but there's definitely something about it there that that's very interesting, and the fact that's rumored where that oath took place with the B'nai Elohim, that they made that oath there to go into the women. So you also have them cursing themselves spiritually at that location. So it's very possible you could say that that could be a place where there is essentially demonic spirits roaming there, because when a place is cursed, stuff like that can happen, because basically to give people the narrative, they put curses on themselves. They said, we're going to do this great sin, and we're swearing an oath to curse ourselves. So you kind of have to wonder, geographical locations like that are cursed, what type of spirits could be roaming over there, but it's just speculation, but it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, so that's mainly what I took away from chapter 11 there. A lot of the interesting geographical locations, also the Sidon. I wonder what Sidon has to do with it there. If they were taking over, if they were fighting with any of the people of Tyre. So that's kind of interesting in my opinion, because how far, Mom, is Phoenicia from like where they're conquering? Like they're going into what the land, they were in the land of Canaan, right? Phoenicia's pretty far from there.
Yes, it is. It's way up north.
So it's just weird that it would say in that chapter the king of Sidon is going over there. So it's a little weird. It's like, unless the Hivites were trying to get his help against Yasharal, that's the only thing I can think. Because it's a little weird he would go all the way from Tyre and Phoenicia all the way to Canaan.
That's a long way.
Yeah. So that's another like type of thing. What's going on with that? So a lot of military conquests. I kind of get excited when we read about stuff like that. I've always been a big person on fan of like history and wars and stuff like that. So I always get excited with that type of those parts in Deuteronomy that show the conquests and stuff like that. So yeah. This seems to be, I wonder if this is like a retelling of some of those conquests. Because this mentioned the Amorite kings, right? So that would have been like Sihon and Og and them. Og of Bashan.
Yeah.
Interesting. By the way, Og of Bashan, fun fact, his bed is how many feet wide? It was like 13 feet wide. I mean, you can only imagine how big the guy is, wide, like how bulky he would have been. 13 feet wide ways. I mean, that, he's pretty big giant.
Pretty huge, yeah.
So, yeah. So, but yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. So, a lot of this though reminds me about do not be afraid. Yahuwah kept reminding Yahusha, son of Nun, don't be afraid. I'm going to hand them over to you. What it seems like too Yahuwah was doing was he caused these tribes to be afraid of them. Like Yahuwah actually put a spirit of fear on these tribes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it. I can't think of anything else to bring up. A lot of this stuff is self-explanatory here. Now, it talks about Lebanon, too, I've noticed, verse 17. So it's interesting that Lebanon seems to be near Mount Hermon. That's something I never thought about. Kind of makes you wonder, how some of the giants would be compared to the cedars of Lebanon.
Yeah,
It's kind of like
yeah.
it's kind of like, why did they use cedars of Lebanon? Well, that's kind of where they lived. So it kind of makes sense why Amos 2:9 says that. Because if Lebanon's right near Mount Hermon, then that makes perfect sense. So I didn't take notice of that until just now in verse 17. So that's kind of interesting. Well, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed studying with us today, listening, tuning in, listening in, and watching our study here. So as I always say, any viewers, listeners out there, new subscribers, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on the YouTube page here or any of my social medias, which I do have linked to the channel. By the way, I do have all of my social media accounts linked, so you guys can reach out to me on any of those platforms. Other than that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the Shabbat. All of our brothers and sisters in Yahuwah and Yahusha out there, have a great rest of your Sabbath. And stay tuned, everyone. Oh, I do want to make a public announcement. At some point, Yahuwah willing, we are going to be redoing some of our old studies that I just want to re-upload and re-record. Couple of them just had a little bit of leaven in them, and I just want to kind of just fix them. Mainly for this public announcement, I wanted to mention about me and Brother Yahusha at some point are going to be redoing the Book of Jubilees expose we did, and as a fellowship, I want to also us redo the Who is the Anti-Messiah study. So those are going to be two all subscribers and viewers and listeners you probably want to tune into. Yahuwah willing, I might be able to make a post on the community so people will be notified ahead of time. But those are the two that have been really heavy on my heart to redo, to really try to get them as perfect as possible and re-upload. Go ahead, Brother Yahusha.
I don't think I've ever seen Who is the Anti-Messiah study. Did you do that one before I came in?
I think
or am I misremembering?
You and the Gibsons, I think, were just joining at that point. It was very early. It was 2020, I'm thinking.
Okay.
It was at least 2-3 years ago. And
I don't really remember it either.
the main issue, the reason I want to redo it, and all of you out there that have seen the study probably know why, is there's a part of it that I referenced Jasher as a historical thing. I'm not going to do that any longer because further testing into that book that me and Brother Yahusha have done, we've realized that it's nothing more than midrashes, nothing more than rabbinical tales that could be true, could not be true. So I'd rather play it safe and just re-record it, take that part out of it, of the study, and just try to make it as grounded as possible. But that was the only major issue that I remember that a sister brought up to me. So that I just want to redo it. Other than that, it was a really good one for those that have seen it. You'll remember that I used even pop culture to show that even in plain sight, Hollywood's been putting out who this tyrant is, who this end times tyrant's going to be. And there's
I
been
wonder if there's a way that we could add in. I don't know if you have it in there or not, but I wonder if there's a way that you could add in that Jesus Christ is a type of Nimrod, type of Tammuz.
Yeah,
That would be interesting.
We can definitely do it. I would just need to do some historical stuff. I would have to look into, maybe get a couple of images showing how the baby Jesus, how even the baby Jesus of the Catholic Church is just a baby Tammuz that the Pope is kissing every Christmas when you see them kissing that inanimate object. That's pretty much a depiction of baby Tammuz with the blonde hair, blue eyes. I think the easiest way to connect it that the JC of the Catholic Church Christianity is Tammuz and Nimrod in disguise is really just looking at how he's depicted in a lot of the mythologies. He's always blonde hair, blue eyes, curly hair. That's how Apollo looks. That's a lot of his iterations look like that. All you have to do is look on Google Images too. For those that are still listening in here on the live, all you have to do is just type in Apollo Greek mythology on Google Images, and you'll find what I'm describing. He'll have like a bow and arrow. He'll be blonde hair, blue eyed. There's been other people too that have written books about this topic. Like I think I'm trying to think of one of the guys out there. He wrote the secret identity of the secret. I think it's called The Secret Identity of Nimrod or something like that. Or something like that. I forget if it's The Secret Identity of the Antichrist or Secret Identity of Nimrod. So multiple people have actually came through research to this understanding. It's definitely not a personal interpretation. I can put that to rest. Definitely, it's not a personal opinion. There's been multiple people that have done research into it. I think it would be good to include. I might look into the book that you sent me from C.J. Coster, see if he has anything about it. But I know Alexander Hislop had a really good book, The Two Babylons, and I know it's very controversial with some people because some people think he doesn't cite sources that well, but a lot of what he says in his book can be backed up if you do your own research. So I'm actually a fan of his book. So, but yeah, we can definitely.
Which one, C.J. Coster or Alexander Hislop?
Oh, well, a lot of people don't like the Two Babylons book by Alexander Hislop because supposedly he didn't cite sources or anything. So a lot of people throw away the baby with the bathwater with that. But I personally like his book. C.J. Coster, I think he cites sources pretty well from what I've heard. I know Brother Dennis has talked about that book a lot. What is it called? That C.J. Coster book that you sent to me.
Come Out of Her, My People.
Oh, Come Out of Her, My People. That's right. Yeah. So that book, I want to see if he has anything about the Tammuz connection, Baal connection. I'm looking there. There's so many sources for it you could find for that. It's very easy to find it. Like, it's just pretty much you just gotta really look into the weeping for Tammuz. People that are listening right now, look for weeping in Tammuz, the connection with that, with the 40 days of Lent. Why do you eat ham on Easter? Because a boar killed Tammuz. It's right in your face. Most of this research, it's not that hard to find. It's right in your face, and so yeah, we could definitely incorporate all that into the re-recording. I want to show historical sources for that. I might look into Encyclopedia Britannica for this, other historical sources, and stuff like that. The statue of Jupiter is pretty interesting too. That it was called. He called him the defender of Gentiles. I found that interesting. Versus Yahuwah, the true Most High, he's the defender of Israel. So there's even a difference in that. So Jupiter or Zeus would be the defender of strangers or Gentiles.
What could help with some of that? Because he did a good job on that one. Truth or Tradition.
Yeah.
He has a lot of good factual stuff on that.
Yeah. I might rewatch that from
that was a very good one.
That
really
Truth or
was.
Tradition video. I might rewatch that and see.
He did a lot of research, on the various different holidays and stuff, and the egg painting and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm going to be mainly looking for specifically if he has anything about Baal and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, it's definitely easy to prove when you look at the depictions of JC in the Catholic Church, where who that really is. It's very easy to figure out because they don't hide it. The Christian Church tries to hide it with the more Caesar Borgia type of look, but the Catholic Church has him straight as blonde hair, blue eyes. There's multiple Catholic murals and stuff like that. I think there's one place in Washington D.C. I forget if it's a monastery or something, but it has like, the blonde hair, blue eyed Jesus statue or painting or whatever, and it looks almost identical to Apollo. Also, there's graven images of Zeus in Greece. When you compare Zeus to how they usually portray the long-haired Jesus, it's almost identical. So I think when we redo this study and we re-upload it, I'm going to show all these on the shared screen for people to check out for themselves, and how it's very easy to prove that the JC of the Christian Church is Nimrod. That's who he really is. And so that's, yeah, I think it would be an important thing to incorporate in that. But the only thing I really needed to edit out was the Jasher part, so it should be very easy. Really, that's the only thing I needed to edit out. I'm still gonna keep the Maccabee stuff in there, because I think even just as a historical source, I think it's valid as a historical book. And it does reference something that is prophecy, referring to the abomination of desolation. So it is actually referencing something that's prophetic in that book. So I have no problem using Maccabees, but Jasher I definitely want to edit out. I don't want to be using that at all. So that's the two main studies, viewers and listeners, subscribers out there, that please stay tuned. We definitely want to work on that and get those re-uploaded. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a great rest of your Sabbath.